Okay, let's just dive right in. This week's deep dive is based on source material that captures something. Well, something I think we've all been feeling lately.
That sort of vague sense of discomfort.
Yeah, exactly. That gnawing feeling that, the world is supposedly moving forward,
Hmm?
but you personally feel stalled. Or maybe like you're not getting anywhere.
It's that sensation, right, where the news you're reading about the economy, about tech, it just doesn't seem to map onto the reality you're living when you try to, I don't know, get something simple done.
Totally. You see these headlines about massive growth, huge breakthroughs, financial stability.
And yet your own experience is one of constant hassle, procedural quicksand, just this feeling of being weighed down by everything moving so slowly.
So that's the paradox we're looking at. The big signals are all screaming full steam ahead, but daily life feels like a traffic jam with no visible cause.
And our mission here is really just observation. We're not judging if this is good or bad.
Nope. We're just looking at how all these individually reasonable events start to feel really strange, even contradictory, when you see them happening on the same timeline. We want to find that point where just, reading the news normally stop making sense.
Exactly. We're trying to find the source of that structural tension, just observing the forces at play and how they're rubbing against each other. We want to put a name on that friction.
So let's start with the raw facts from this past week. We've confirmed these across a ton of reports and documents. We're just going to lay out 4 key points, absolutely no spin.
Think of these as the four cornerstones of what was happening.
Okay, fact 1, high-level acceleration. We saw this continued, really aggressive investment and planning in abstract sectors, mostly AI and finance.
And it showed no signs of slowing down. For example, one source noted a global tech company announced, what, $10 billion in new infrastructure plans in a single afternoon.
The pace of that,
Yeah.
the capital, the theoretical scaling, it's just breakneck.
Right. If you were only watching AI development, you'd think we were in this period of unbelievably rapid expansion, no question.
Okay, fact 2, financial stability. And this one is key. The major financial markets were, for the most part, stable.
Not chaotic.
Not chaotic at all, not collapsing. They were often just seen as being in a predictable, non-chaotic phase. Volatility was low.
The general mood from central banks, from the markets, was kind of business as usual. Stability was the key word. If you just looked at the stock ticker, you wouldn't see any sign of a problem.
But this is where the story starts to split. This is where that discomfort comes from. Fact 3, ground constraints.
Yeah.
At the exact same time, we saw these scattered but very persistent reports about delays and real physical constraints in the real world.
And we're not talking about just, one-off construction delays.
No, we're talking persistent issues across power grids, logistics bottlenecks, and critically, these chronic shortages of skilled labor that just refuse to go away.
What's really interesting there is that these constraints, they rarely made the big headlines as some kind of crisis. They were just persistent, annoying delays.
Right.
A town refusing a new utility hookup, a component stuck at a port for 3 weeks, a permit review taking 6 months longer than anyone planned. They all point to this sticky physical reality that just can't move as fast as the money being layered on top of it.
And that brings us to the last one. Fact 4, policy execution. We didn't see any huge, sudden policy shifts, no big new sanctions or frameworks.
Instead, what we saw was the steady, methodical, and kind of surprisingly strict application of the existing rules.
So the system wasn't being rewritten. It was just running its maintenance cycles, constantly applying the rules that were already there, especially around things like compliance and security.
The sources called it a transition to an execution OS. It's like a system that's no longer focused on big new ideas, but is just intensely focused on auditing and compliance, making sure every rule is followed, no matter how fast the digital world wants to go.
And the speed of compliance is
Glacial, often glacial.
okay, so that's the baseline. You've got this massive acceleration, stable markets, but also these persistent physical constraints and a slow, strict rule book. So here's the challenge for me. If the market is stable, shouldn't that stability eventually force the AI boom to slow down and align with the ground constraints? Why is the money ignoring the reality?
That's the perfect question, and it really gets at that structural tension. The reason the market doesn't seem to care, at least in the short term, is that the financial and planning layers are just operating on a totally different timeline.
They're not on the same clock.
Not at all. They don't have to reconcile immediately. The investment can keep flowing, the plans can get bigger, because the actual realization of those plans is projected years and years into the future.
So the AI boom and the steady markets only seem contradictory if you assume they're happening at the same speed.
Exactly. The core observation is that these reasonable facts, all happening at once, create what the source material calls an incongruence. You're reading about all this momentum, but you're experiencing resistance, waiting times, endless procedures. It's that feeling of moving forward but not getting easier.
Which really highlights the two different speeds. The abstract stuff, the plans, the funds, they update constantly, daily even.
They live in a digital world where time is fluid. But the physical human reality that has to support all of it, the power for the data center, the labor, the 2-year environmental permit process, that reality can't keep up.
It just can't sustain that kind of velocity.
No, it's constrained by physics, by geology, by regulations. These things move at annual or multi-year speeds. They're the structural speed limits of the world.
And that gap, that tension between the abstract speed and the physical speed, that's what shows up as this widespread friction we all feel. It's the slow grind, not a sudden explosion.
Which brings us to the lens that helps organize this confusion: velocity difference. Or an even better term is shear. This is the one perspective the GOA analysis used to make sense of everything.
Okay, let's put a name on it.
Yeah.
We need to explain shear in a way that, isn't super technical.
Sure, think of shear not as a failure, but as two parallel layers just trying to slide past each other at different speeds. It's like the plan is sprinting forward, but the feet, the operational ground level, can only manage a slow walk.
So the parts aren't fighting each other.
Not at all. They're just moving incompatibly.
I think the most relatable example I saw in the logs was about financial tech hitting up against old school bureaucracy. A big bank launches a super fast AI-driven mortgage system, right?
Bring us ahead.
Moving fast.
Promises a 48-hour approval.
But then that sleek digital system still needs a clerk in some tiny county office to manually check a paper deed and physically stamp it. That 6-week wait time for the clerk, that's the feet being stuck. That gap is the shear.
Exactly. And the source logs are clear. The AI and financial layers are moving at daily or quarterly speeds. They can mobilize billions in weeks.
But the physical infrastructure they need, securing water rights, building a substation, getting regulatory approval, that stuff moves at an annual or even multi-year pace.
So if your plan is moving 30 times faster than the power line needed to make it real, the friction you generate in that gap, that's the shear.
And what's really unsettling is how consistent this pattern is. The sources say we're seeing this exact same mismatch in totally unrelated fields.
The speed of sanctions enforcement versus the speed of global logistics, the speed of AI scaling versus the speed of mining the metals you need for the chips.
It's the same pattern everywhere.
And that consistency is why this matters to you, the listener. The friction you feel isn't just one bad policy, it's a systemic pattern. These high-speed layers are, counterintuitively, causing a sort of quiet hardening of the physical layers they depend on because they're just constantly pushing against these fixed limits.
Okay, let's connect this shear directly back to daily life. Where are we feeling this friction in our own lives?
Well, when we look at daily life, what the sources call the life load, the dominant cost isn't some big explosive failure. It's what they call attrition-based loads. It's a fantastic concept.
Attrition-based load, lay that out for us. What does that actually look like?
It's the accumulated hassle, the difficulty planning anything because timelines are unreliable. It's the constant little fee increases, the service charges. I read one source that called it the "I just spent 20 minutes on hold for a 3-minute interaction" tax.
I feel that. That
So-
captures it perfectly. So life isn't breaking down. We're not in a crisis.
Yeah.
But our disposable capacity, our free time, our mental margin for error, it's just being steadily eroded.
Exactly. You might be financially stable, but your cognitive load is going up because of all these unsynchronized processes.
Okay, so let's flip that. What does this mean for the money side, for business and investment?
Well, if the high-speed layers are always bumping into physical constraints, this velocity mismatch actually changes where value starts to concentrate.
So away from the flashy high-growth themes.
Precisely. The investment focus shifts directly to the choke points, the things that can actually resolve the mismatch. If the physical world is the bottleneck, value flows to whatever can fix that bottleneck.
Which means things like power generation, reliable logistics, secure compliance systems, because that execution OS demands compliance. And anything in construction or permitting that can actually speed up the ground layer.
And the sources had a really crucial warning for what they called upper stream plans. Any plan that only looks at the high-level stuff, the finance, the policy, without deeply integrating the physical constraints.
It's going to fail.
It's prone to sheer loss, which means the profits just get delayed and delayed and delayed because at the end of the day, reality always wins on the timeline.
It seems like the market kind of gets the reality of sheer, even if the daily news doesn't always spell it out.
Oh, it absolutely does. And you can even see it geographically. The source analysis used Tokyo as a great example. AI investment is skyrocketing, but the friction is immediate. It gets absorbed by long-term waits for grid upgrades and the difficulty of finding land and labor.
So the on-the-ground reality just forces everything to wait longer. I heard one story about a 6-month permit process for a tiny utility expansion that should have taken like 6 weeks. That's the sheer being absorbed by time.
Now, contrast that with Singapore. External risks, like shipping disruptions, often get absorbed much more smoothly there. Why? Because their high-speed institutional layers, their urban OS, are already highly synchronized with their infrastructure.
Meaning the paperwork and the actual digging operate on a similar timeline.
Pretty much. They have pre-approved zones, highly efficient digital regulatory processes. They've minimized the gap. The physical and abstract layers are moving closer to the same speed, which means less friction for everyone.
This has been a fascinating way to look at why stability and progress can feel so uncomfortable at the same time. So, to be clear, we haven't drawn any conclusions. We've made no predictions.
Right. We've just defined a useful perspective. Sheer. The idea that this structural velocity difference, not simple failure, is what's generating the friction we're all feeling.
So for the coming week, maybe the thing to do is look beyond the big headlines about progress or stability.
Yeah, we're asking you to look for the subtle signs of where this mismatch is playing out.
Look for where the load is accumulating silently. Where are you being made to wait? Over and over. Where does that expectation of digital speed conflict most harshly with the stubborn reality of the physical world?
Focus on those processes where the plan sounds fantastic, but the actual execution is constantly stalled. Where does that gap seem biggest in your own professional or personal life?
Because those parts of the world that are supposedly moving forward but never seem to get any easier, they're not signs of a simple failure. They're places where this structural velocity mismatch, this shear, is leaving its clearest mark.
And that, we think, is where the most interesting observation lies right now. We encourage you to apply this velocity mismatch lens to your own news intake this week. See what changes when you stop looking for failure and start looking for differential speed.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive. We'll talk to you next week.